Hello, and welcome to the Introduction to the Academic Excellence Acceleration Roadmap Leader Edition. I'm Versha Munshi South, and I'm a leadership coach at TNTP. Very quickly, I wanted to give you a brief background on TNTP in case you're not familiar with our organization. We were founded in 1997 by teachers who believe all students deserved great teaching with a particular focus on equity for students who have been historically underserved by our school systems. Today, our work focuses on three areas: rigorous academics, talented people, and supportive environments. We offer a range of support from strategic advice to multi-year execution with school districts, charter schools, state departments of education, and even parochial schools. TNTP and DESE have partnered on several initiatives, including teacher diversification and deeper learning. To develop the roadmaps, we heard from educators, school and district leaders, students, and community members from across the Commonwealth. The insights and perspectives that these stakeholders shared were essential to developing the roadmaps, as well as the learning experiences that we will be offering this summer. DESE and TNTP closely collaborated to ensure that these roadmaps are aligned with the unique needs of students across the Commonwealth and existing tools and resources that are currently provided by DESE. Today's webinar is centered on building a common understanding of what learning acceleration is, as well as familiarizing ourselves with the roadmap so that we can ground our planning in this approach. Following today's webinar, we'll be launching a 4-part professional learning series based on the key and complex concepts within the roadmap. More information on how to sign up for each session will be shared at the end of the webinar. Throughout the summer, we have 4 opportunities for leaders to engage in professional learning sessions. They will be provided in both synchronous and asynchronous formats. You're also welcome to attend open office hours, which start on June 14th. Here are the objectives for today's session. Please take a moment and read them to yourself. Despite the intense efforts of educators and families, we must acknowledge that many of our students are facing unfinished learning heading into the summer and the next school year. While it is not a new challenge for educators to serve students with varied academic needs, the pandemic has made this challenge significantly more pronounced and widespread. To effectively meet the needs of our students, particularly those most impacted by the pandemic, we need to focus on making sure that all of our kids receive the culturally responsive support they need to be successful in their grade level. One specific way we will approach this is through an accelerated learning approach. So our key question here is, why are we accelerating rather than remediating student learning? It's important to keep in mind that acceleration is not about just going through the curriculum at a faster pace. It is about providing students with just-in-time supports that will allow them to access their grade level content. In other words, if a student hasn't mastered the earlier skills they require to complete a grade-appropriate assignment, the student receives just-in-time support, giving the student just the right amount of time and help to move forward right when they need that help through scaffolds and coordinated interventions. Remediation, on the other hand, is putting students in below grade level content to fill in all their previous gaps. That typical approach to remediation, providing work better suited for earlier grades, won't come close to catching students up and will likely compound the problem. In TNTP's recent study, The Opportunity Myth, we found this approach of, though well-intentioned, practically guarantees that students will lose more academic ground and reinforces misguided beliefs that some students can't ever do grade level work. The students stuck in this vicious cycle are disproportionately the most vulnerable: students of color, students from low-income families, students with special needs, students with other learning needs. With remediation, these specific groups of students often do not even get the opportunity to access the grade level content that would support unfinished learning and staying on grade level. In other words, doubling down on current strategies for catching students up will only widen opportunity and achievement gaps. Students and schools need to be ready on the first day with a fundamentally different strategy for diagnosing unfinished learning and preparing students to access grade level instruction. So let's go ahead and unpack this concept a little bit more based on what we've learned through the opportunity myth. Even before school closures, we knew that students often didn't have access to grade level assignments. When we conducted the research in the opportunity myth, we looked at more than 5,000 assignments and 20,000 pieces of student work from 5 districts across the country. We saw that students often didn't have access to grade level assignments. In fact, only about a quarter of assignments gave students a chance to meet the demands of the grade level standards in the 5 districts that we studied. We found this is easier to understand when you see contrasting examples of content that students experienced. So in one 8th grade classroom, using the district adopted expeditionary learning materials, students had the chance to read A Mighty Long Way, My Journey to Justice at Little Rock Central High School. And then they wrote an informational essay analyzing the ways in which the press affected the events in Little Rock. This activity allowed students to fully meet the depth of multiple standards while also building their knowledge of the world in a meaningful way. However, in another 8th grade classroom in the same district, students read a 5th grade level text called Penguins at Risk. Students then completed multiple choice vocabulary questions and filled in vowels on a word completion activity. This activity was not aligned to any 8th grade literacy standards or in fact any literacy standards at any grade level. We can see that this approach to remediation is not appropriate for any students and particularly those who need to catch up. By and large, students were meeting the demands of their assignments. 71% were earning A's and B's. But when we evaluated student work against the grade level standard, students only succeeded 17% of the time. This points to the glaring challenges of teacher-created assessments and assignments. And this challenge will only be exacerbated as we continue into next year, as teachers are working furiously to meet so many needs with less time and more obstacles. But our study showed something promising. Students who received more frequent access to grade level content made significantly larger gains than their peers who did not. Specifically, we saw they were able to make 1.7 more months of academic progress and 7.3 more months per students who were furthest behind. This data tells us once again that we need to accelerate and not remediate student learning. Recent research suggests that more students have experienced more unfinished learning over the last year than ever before. And as a field, 2 key strategies have emerged to move forward, one of remediation and one of acceleration. Now, what is challenging about studying this question is that not much data exists. School systems typically don't track which approach teachers are using, or even if students are receiving grade level assignments. But Zern, a nonprofit whose high-quality online platform is used by 1 in 4 elementary students nationwide, has been uniquely positioned to do just that. In our research paper that was just released in partnership with Zern, we focused on the efficacy of these 2 approaches, remediation and acceleration, and what we can uncover about how to most efficiently and equitably support unfinished learning for all students. Now, the headline through this research was that what we found reaffirmed our findings in the opportunity myth around which students do and do not receive the opportunity to succeed on grade level work. Here we find that students in high poverty schools are significantly more likely to be remediated than their wealthier counterparts, even when their level of struggle is nearly identical to their wealthy counterparts. The key point here is that students in lower income classrooms were more likely to be heavily remediated than their high income counterparts, despite similar levels of academic readiness. So in this chart, you can see the differences by poverty level. Here we zoomed out and observed patterns of remediation we saw across 100,000 classrooms with 2 million students in this past school year. The vertical axis shows the likelihood that a student in a heavy remediation classroom, one where a significant portion of content covered is from a previous grade level. Now, the horizontal axis buckets these classrooms by the level of struggle on early grade level content, specifically the number of repeated struggle alerts a class of 20 students would have per lesson. In other words, it's a proxy for the readiness of that classroom for grade level content. The farther to the left, the lower rate of struggle. The more ready students are to be learning on grade level. The lines are split by demographics. The black line represents students in low poverty classrooms, while the blue are classrooms in high poverty schools. Now let's look at the leftmost data points. Here are classrooms in the lowest struggle category. basically students who are equally ready for grade level content. On the black line here, for low poverty classrooms, 8% of students are heavily remediated. Now, let's look up at the blue line, the high poverty classroom, where for the same rate of struggle, 15% of students are remediated, double the remediation despite the same demonstrated readiness. And what the line charts go on to show is the difference is consistent across all levels of readiness. Students in lower income schools and classrooms are more likely to be heavily remediated than higher income counterparts, despite similar levels of readiness. So what did we find? In short, we found strong evidence that learning acceleration works and that it could be the key to unwinding generations-old academic inequities that the pandemic has only exacerbated. Not only that, our findings from this research reaffirmed our finding in the opportunity myth that students of color and those from low-income backgrounds are less likely to have access to the challenging grade-appropriate assignments that they deserve. Yet there's also reason for optimism. Learning acceleration really does seem to work to help kids catch up, and is particularly effective for students of color and those from low-income families. We're not going to walk you through the whole paper and every chart in it, but we did want to show you at least part of it to help you understand the scale of what we saw there. The stamp here is that remediation is intuitive. Kids miss this, so we need to go back and teach it to them. But what we know is that remediation is not effective and does additional harm. So I'd like you to pause here and reflect on your own. How do you define acceleration? How do you define remediation? And take some time to independently plan. How would you articulate why your organization needs to adopt an accelerated learning approach? And you might even want to take the time to draft your elevator pitch that you will share with your staff about acceleration and remediation. On page 28 of the Leader Roadmap, you will find additional language you may want to use to communicate this concept to your staff. You can take a moment to read the slide on your own. Remember that remediation may be intuitive, but it is not effective and potentially can cause additional harm. Next, we are going to move into the acceleration roadmap. I will walk you through the key ideas of the guides so that you can reflect on key questions that you will need to answer early on to inform your planning. Our goal is that by the end of this webinar, you feel prepared to make a plan for the school year in which you're able to bring this approach to teaching and learning alive. The acceleration roadmap is a tool that exists in two formats. There's an educated version and there's a school leader edition. It is designed to provide a focused and phased approach to supporting students in the 21-22 school year, a year that will lay the foundation for accelerated learning for the next several years. The roadmap phases are akin to what we would see in any normal school year: diagnosing and planning the current state, launching the year, monitoring progress, and reflection along the way. Although this year will not be typical in many ways, we are not completely reinventing the wheel. The learning acceleration approach will support bringing your students into grade level instruction and supporting their well-being. But many of the things that we discuss here will be things that you already do, things that you've seen done, or things that you've been meaning to try, but perhaps haven't yet prioritized. In the planning phase, we will help you prioritize what's most important for your students in your school and classroom to make accelerated learning a reality. The roadmap is organized around three overarching priorities, which are grounded in research that we know will support learning acceleration for students and were developed through extensive stakeholder feedback. The approach to each priority is designed to create equitable experiences and outcomes for all of your students in a manner that is affirming of their race, identity, home language, and unique abilities. I'll give you a moment to read these priorities to yourself. A few key points on these priorities. All three of them are essential and should be treated as such. Therefore, we want to avoid the mindset that you must do one before the other and emphasize that all three are incredibly important. You may find, however, that you are prioritizing specific aspects of each priority depending on your context. While we are stamping these priorities as essential, we are not saying that these are the only things that will be happening in schools this year. As in any year, we understand that a multitude of initiatives are underway. But what we are saying is that these priorities are unskippable in order to accelerate learning this upcoming year. So let's unpack these priorities. First, we prioritize relationships and building a sense of belonging for students and families. We have seen in the last year that it's both essential and impactful to build partnerships and leverage community to ensure children have the support they need. Students feeling socially connected, supported, and respected is actually a condition of academic success. Second, we prioritize supporting educators with monitoring students' understanding of grade level content and using data to inform day-to-day planning and instruction. By having a more informed understanding of what our students' needs are, we can address all learners through intentional and very strategic support. In some cases, we think of diagnosing understanding as primarily the test at the beginning of a year or a unit. But when accelerating learning, it's essential to have real-time information on a day-to-day basis through formative assessments to provide targeted scaffolds. And third, we continue to prioritize strong instruction, the headline being that students receive consistent access to grade-appropriate assignments, especially students who are performing below grade level and in the past may not have been exposed to grade level content or been given the support to access it. This means that we are prioritizing instructional practices and system structures that meet the unique needs of students who are learning English, students who learn or think in a non-typical way or have special needs, and students who have unfinished learning. We support students using strong instructional practices and providing appropriate academic accommodations for students with disabilities. So I'd invite you to pause and reflect here and consider how does centering your approach to accelerated learning around these three priorities promote equitable student experiences. And also consider what data and evidence do you have available from this past school year to inform your planning around these three priorities. What additional data and evidence do you need to plan for the 21-22 school year? And how will you gather that data to inform your planning? So now, having discussed the three overarching priorities for accelerating learning this upcoming school year, and thinking about what information and data you will need to begin gathering for planning, we are now going to explore how the roadmap is organized around the three priorities and how it can help you and your staff prepare. We will start with a quick overview of the 4 phases. Each phase corresponds with a recommended time of the school year for when each should be occurring. We know schools, districts, and educators are in different places in their planning and recovering efforts. And many of you may already have started to incorporate many of the action steps outlined here. This guide is organized in a manner that allows you to chart your own course, starting at the beginning, identifying steps you already have in place, and then identifying priority additional steps as soon as your team is ready. Phase 1 is starting now and before the first day of school. Phase 2 is launching those plans. Phase 3 is when you're building in your monitoring systems and structures. And phase 4 is for reflection and planning for the next school year. The priority level guidance includes key guiding questions, suggested steps for success, and aligned resources. On page 8 of your guide, you will find this broad overview or snapshot of the key action steps for the school year. It is essential that as you use this tool, you consider your own context. As we mentioned before, we recognize that leaders may already have a plan in place for some or even all of the listed action steps. Again, the timeframes in the document are approximate and are designed to illustrate when certain key actions may be most effective. Districts and schools should adapt the suggested dates to fit their own local context. Now that we have discussed how each phase provides guidance around the priorities, I would like for us to take a closer look at what you will find when you look at a phase and dive into a specific priority. Within each table, you will find the overarching action step for the specific priority for that time of the year, as well as the overall aim or purpose for this action step. Given the different places schools and educators are in, and the need to set the conditions for sustainable change, we encourage you to review the charts in each phase, identify what you already have in place, and focus on one additional step at a time, working your way down the list as you and your team are ready. Now that we've explored the basics of the roadmap, I would like to direct you to one other area of the roadmap outside those phases, and that is the appendix, which begins on page 22 of the roadmap. In the appendix, you will also find resources and guidance that further unpack the how behind the steps in the roadmap. For example, in Appendix A, you will find resources for evaluating students' access to high-quality instructional materials and creating a PD calendar. We can pause here for some independent reflection and consider, what is your role in promoting an accelerated learning approach? Who is best suited to lead specific aspects of this work and why? Who else might need to be at the table? With your leadership role in mind, you will want to plan strategically and use the roadmap as a tool to support you with identifying high priority goals and action steps that will best serve the students within your unique context. Many of you have started some of this strategic planning by completing the self-assessment tool. If after you complete the self-assessment, it still feels very difficult to pinpoint what area to prioritize, then consider what areas appear to need the most attention based on your responses. Keep in mind that the roadmap is not meant to be a prescriptive tool or a checklist. So it's not necessary nor strategic to focus exclusively on completing all of the potential action steps associated with a specific priority. In other words, you do not need to complete all the steps or action items in priority 1 before you address the areas of need in priority 2. It is more strategic to identify 1 or 2 next steps related to each priority and then move on to the next step when you're ready. So putting it all together, we hope that you're leaving this webinar able to describe the difference between learning acceleration and remediation, that you can explain why your school is taking a learning acceleration approach to instruction. We hope that you understand the purpose of the different components of the roadmap and that you've identified a starting place and next step based on your self-assessment and the priorities in the roadmap. Thank you for being here today. We know it's been a long year, and we're so grateful for all the work that you've done on behalf of children and families in Massachusetts. We hope that you enjoy the session and that you join us for our 4 additional professional development learning sessions this summer. Remember, they will be provided in synchronous and asynchronous formats. We also have open office hours during which you can come for question and answer sessions or bring a problem of practice to do some collaborative planning around. Thank you again for coming and engaging, and you can reach out directly to me if you have any questions at all.